Cemeteries are often seen as places of eternal rest, marked by memories and silent tributes. However, in Russia, before 2005, these sites were nothing more than forgotten remnants, unguarded and easily accessible to anyone willing to explore the territory of the dead. That was exactly what a mysterious man did. He wandered through cemeteries at night carrying only a notebook and a pencil. At first, his presence seemed harmless, just a simple observer recording details of the graves. However, his fascination soon took a macabre turn. Using tools left behind by gravediggers, he began opening tombs, not out of archaeological curiosity, but to satisfy a dark desire. At first, spending nights beside coffins seemed enough for him, but over time the cramped space of the graves became a problem. That's when he found a terrifying solution: taking the bodies to his own home. There, he began a project that defied all logic and sanity, transforming human corpses into grotesque works of art. It may sound like an urban legend or an exaggerated story meant to scare, but this is a real case, one of the most disturbing in modern Russian history. The man responsible for this atrocity: Anatoly Moskvin, a historian and former university professor, whose name would be forever etched in the country's criminal history. By mid-2009, police in Nizhny Novgorod began receiving a series of strange reports. Families claimed that their loved ones' graves had been violated. In some cases, the bodies had merely been disturbed, but in others, the corpses had simply disappeared. The severity of the situation led authorities to launch a large-scale operation, mobilizing investigative units from various regions, including Moscow. The investigation soon uncovered a chilling pattern. Most of the stolen bodies belonged to recently deceased girls and teenage females. This detail led police to suspect that the perpetrator had access to death records. As a result, cemetery workers and people connected to funeral services were placed on the list of suspects. Another sinister theory also emerged: the possibility that an extremist group was behind the thefts, collecting female corpses for dark rituals. At the time, the involvement of a cultist or satanic sect seemed unlikely in Russia, a country where such groups rarely had any influence. However, the nature of the crime was so unusual that investigators decided to keep an open mind. Guards and patrol dogs were assigned to watch over the cemeteries, but this did not stop new thefts. Before long, other areas began to be affected, expanding the criminals' reach up to 400 kilometers east of Moscow. The case gained media attention, further increasing the pressure on authorities. Amid public outcry, the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs took over the investigation. According to a spokesperson for the institution, extremist organizations remained the primary suspects. Therefore, agents specialized in such crimes were brought in to assist with the case. Despite their efforts, the crimes remained unsolved for nearly 2 years. But in 2011, an unexpected event would divert the authorities' attention and temporarily halt the search for the grave desecrator: a terrorist attack at Domodedovo Airport in Moscow, which left dozens dead and hundreds injured. The wave of attacks that had been plaguing the country forced the police to shift their focus toward combating terrorism. Meanwhile, the corpse thefts continued, until finally, a crucial lead would put investigators on the trail of the true perpetrator. After the Moscow attack, the corpse thefts continued, but now with a detail that caught the authorities' attention. Some witnesses began reporting the recurring presence of a strange man in the region's cemeteries. He was often seen painting over the photographs on the tombstones of Muslim graves, an unusual and highly disrespectful act. The information reached investigators, who quickly tracked down this individual. It didn't take long before they found him in a cemetery, caught in the act of painting tombstones. He was immediately approached and arrested. His name was Anatoly Moskvin. At first, he seemed like nothing more than an eccentric. A historian and former university professor, Anatoly was known for his vast knowledge of cemeteries and funeral rituals. For years, he had written academic articles and books on the subject, earning respect in intellectual circles. However, investigators soon uncovered something disturbing. He had already been questioned multiple times by police, who were suspicious of his frequent visits to cemeteries. Yet because he always presented academic credentials, no one had ever truly suspected him. Intrigued, the officers decided to search his home. What they found there was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Anatoly lived in a small apartment with his elderly parents. When investigators arrived, his parents, surprised by the police's presence, allowed them to enter without resistance. At the start of the search, they found detailed cemetery maps, photographs of desecrated graves, and plaques taken from tombstones. But that was just the beginning. The officers soon came across dozens of dolls scattered throughout the apartment. Some were on shelves, others sitting on sofas or arranged as part of the decor. However, upon closer inspection, they made a horrifying discovery. These were not ordinary dolls, but rather the mummified corpses of young girls. Each of the dolls was dressed in elegant children's clothing and carefully made up to look as lifelike as possible. Some had wax masks covering their faces, while others had wigs and accessories. The most terrifying detail was that the bodies had been preserved, carefully stuffed with rags and synthetic materials to maintain a human form. The discovery shocked all of Russia. On November 2, 2011, authorities announced that at least 26 bodies had been found in Anatoly's home. Images of the scene were released, showing the disguised corpses amid a chaotic environment filled with books, papers, and funeral-related objects. As the investigation progressed, it was revealed that Anatoly had desecrated approximately 150 graves over the course of a decade. Most of his victims were young girls buried in cemeteries around Nizhny Novgorod, though a few bodies had been taken from Moscow. When interrogated, Anatoly showed no remorse. On the contrary, he spoke openly about his actions and explained in detail how he carried out the desecrations. He believed he was doing something noble, saving the children from death and giving them a new life. To him, these girls were not corpses, but rather his adopted daughters. During interrogations, Anatoly Moskvin described his process with chilling detail and unsettling composure. He explained that he spent hours analyzing obituaries, searching for girls who, according to him, were calling out to him. When he found a grave that piqued his interest, he would visit it and sleep on top of the burial site, believing this would allow him to communicate with the child's spirit. If he felt that the girl wanted to be rescued, he would return days later to dig up her body. To preserve the corpses, Anatoly developed his own mummification method. He used salt and baking soda to dry them out and hid them in secluded locations, near cemeteries, until they were completely dehydrated. Then he would take them home, where he began transforming the bodies into dolls. He wrapped the corpses in layers of cloth, stuffed their cavities with rags and other materials to maintain their shape, and covered their faces with painted wax masks. He dressed the girls in luxurious children's clothing and placed wigs on them to make them look lifelike. According to him, this was a way to keep them presentable until the day he could bring them back to life. The most disturbing aspect was how Anatoly interacted with the corpses. He talked to them, watched cartoons with them, sang lullabies, and even celebrated their birthdays. To him, these children were still alive, just waiting for the right moment to wake up. When his parents were questioned, they claimed they had never suspected anything. Since they spent little time at home, they simply assumed that the dolls scattered around the apartment were part of their son's eccentricities. They knew Anatoly had an unusual fascination with toys, but they never imagined it was hiding such a horrifying secret. The revelation of his actions shocked the nation. The victims' families were devastated to learn that their daughters' bodies had been desecrated and turned into grotesque dolls. For many, the pain of losing a loved one was relived in the worst possible way. Outrage swept through the population, which demanded severe punishment for Anatoly. The case quickly gained media attention, both in Russia and abroad. Newspapers and television channels explored every detail of the story, amplifying the crime's impact. The image of a respected intellectual who secretly collected children's corpses in his home seemed like something out of a horror movie. The media coverage sparked a debate about the limits of madness and crime. Was Anatoly a murderer or merely a mentally disturbed man? Did he fully understand what he was doing, or had his mind created a parallel reality where everything seemed normal? These questions would divide opinions in the trial that was about to take place. Anatoly Moskvin's trial became one of the most controversial in modern Russian history. To authorities, he was not just an ordinary criminal, but someone whose deeply disturbed mind defied any logical explanation. Since his arrest, he had cooperated, with investigators providing details about his actions without showing any remorse. Given the complexity of the case, the court ordered a thorough psychiatric evaluation. Doctors reached a chilling diagnosis. Anatoly suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. This severe disorder affects a person's perception of reality, causing delusions and hallucinations that feel completely real to them. It was believed that his crimes were directly linked to this condition. In his distorted world, he saw the dead girls as beings who could still be brought back to life. To him, turning them into dolls was not an act of desecration, but an attempt to protect them from being forgotten. The revelation of this diagnosis outraged the public. Many of the victims' families saw the possibility of Anatoly being declared legally insane as an insult to justice. After all, even if he was mentally ill, he had violated the graves of dozens of children and caused immeasurable pain to their families. To these people, he should be treated as a criminal and punished accordingly. However, the psychiatrists who evaluated the case were firm in their conclusion. Anatoly was not fully aware of his actions and therefore could not be held criminally responsible. He was declared unfit to stand trial and, in May 2012, was sentenced to involuntary commitment in a psychiatric hospital, where he would remain under treatment for an indefinite period. The decision sparked intense debate in Russian society. On one side were those who believed that hospitalization was the only fair option, as Anatoly had not acted out of malice, but due to a severely ill mind. On the other side were those who thought the sentence was too lenient, fearing that he might one day be released. In the years that followed, his confinement was reviewed multiple times. In 2014, a medical team concluded that he was still unfit for release. By 2018, a new report stated that he was no longer considered a danger and recommended his discharge for home treatment. However, due to strong public opposition, the decision was overturned, and he remained institutionalized. Today, Anatoly Moskvin remains confined in a psychiatric facility, far from the cemeteries that once obsessed his mind. The future of the ice bone collector remains uncertain, but the memory of his crimes endures, haunting those whose daughters were taken from their eternal rest. To understand what led Anatoly Moskvin to commit such crimes, it is necessary to look back at his past. He was born and raised in the city of Gorky, in the former Soviet Union, now called Nizhny Novgorod. From a young age, he was already seen as a different child. Intelligent and self-taught, he dedicated himself to learning new languages and exploring local cemeteries, where he would spend hours walking alone. His parents, proud of his above-average intelligence, never saw his isolation as a cause for concern. However, behind his curiosity lay a deep trauma. At the age of 9, Anatoly was a victim of sexual abuse. He never told anyone about what happened, but the impact was evident. Over the years, he became increasingly withdrawn, developing outbursts of anger for no apparent reason. In addition to the abuse, Anatoly reported another event that he claimed changed his life forever. According to him, during his childhood, he was forced by a group of men to attend the funeral of a girl named Natasha Petrova. There he was made to kiss the corpse of the girl while his mother placed a ring on his finger and another on the finger of the dead girl. For him, that moment symbolized a marriage and marked his connection with the dead. Despite the richness of detail in his story, investigators never found any records of this girl or any sect involved in the alleged ritual. Experts believe that this memory may have been an illusion created by his disturbed mind, combining his childhood trauma with his growing obsession with death. Throughout his adolescence and youth, Anatoly immersed himself more and more in the study of funeral rituals and ancient cultures. He graduated in philology from Moscow State University and became a renowned expert in cemeteries, Celtic folklore, and occultism. He even published books and academic articles, building a respectable reputation within the academic community. However, his obsession with death became increasingly evident. He completely withdrew from social life and never showed interest in romantic relationships. Instead, he devoted himself exclusively to the study of cemeteries, walking miles each day to catalog graves and collect information. It was this peculiar passion that led him to work as a freelance researcher, hired by a publisher to document over 700 cemeteries spread across 40 regions. For 3 years, Anatoly traveled rural roads and slept in abandoned farms, churches, and even inside coffins that were being prepared for burials. At first, his work was seen as a valuable contribution to local history. But as his fixation on the dead grew, his academic research turned into something much darker. Anatoly didn't just want to study the graves, he wanted to bring them into his own home. Over the years, Anatoly Moskvin transformed from a cemetery scholar into a true grave desecrator. He believed he was fulfilling a mission, rescuing dead girls from the darkness of cemeteries and bringing them into a welcoming environment where they could live again. When he found the corpses beginning to decompose, Anatoly sought ways to preserve them. After researching mummification techniques, he developed his own method, using salt and baking soda to dry out the bodies. Once dehydrated, he stuffed them with rags, wrapped them in layers of cloth, and covered their faces with decorated wax masks. To complete the illusion, he dressed the bodies in children's clothing and wigs, turning them into macabre dolls. According to Anatoly, his goal was never to desecrate the dead, but rather to care for them. He claimed to feel great affection for the girls and considered himself a kind of adoptive father. In addition to talking to the corpses, he watched cartoons with them, sang lullabies, and even celebrated their birthdays. In his testimony, he insisted that he had never had any sexual intent when exhuming the children. However, experts believed that his behavior was linked to a psychological disorder in which he replaced sexual gratification with a ritual of possession and control over the bodies. During the investigation, police discovered that Anatoly had attempted to adopt a girl years earlier, but his request was denied by the government due to his low income. This only reinforced his belief that he was saving the children. Since he couldn't be a father in the world of the living, he became a father to the dead girls instead. Despite all the evidence, Anatoly remained steadfast in his justification. He claimed that he did not violate graves out of malice, but because the spirits of the children called out to him. He insisted that he only unearthed those who asked to be taken. If he didn't feel a connection with the spirit, he left the grave untouched. Psychiatrists who examined his case realized that he truly believed this. His mind had created a parallel reality in which his actions were justifiable and even noble. To him, obeying the law was less important than fulfilling his mission to protect the girls from being forgotten. While Anatoly remained confined in the psychiatric clinic, the case continued to spark controversy. Many questioned whether his institutionalization was an appropriate punishment or merely a way to prevent him from facing a real trial. The victims' families in turn remained outraged, feeling that no form of justice could ever make up for the pain they had suffered. The case of the human dolls was not just a gruesome crime, but a chilling reflection of how far the human mind can stray from reality. And despite his sentence of confinement, one lingering question remained. Could Anatoly ever be cured, or would he one day return to commit the same crimes? Years passed, but the case of Anatoly Moskvin continued to spark discussions and theories. While he remained confined in a psychiatric clinic, experts attempted to understand his mind and the extent to which his paranoid schizophrenia influenced his actions. Modern psychiatry suggests that individuals with this type of disorder often create elaborate narratives to justify their obsessions. In Anatoly's case, his fixation on death and funeral rituals led him to construct a reality where he was not desecrating graves, but rescuing abandoned girls. He saw himself as a guardian, someone giving them a second chance. But did he truly believe this? Or on some level, did he know he was committing a crime? The fact that he hid the bodies and disguised them as dolls suggests he was aware that his actions would not be accepted by society. Furthermore, the way he interacted with the corpses raises questions about his true intentions. Although he denied any sexual motivation, his unusual behavior and exclusive fixation on female bodies led experts to remain skeptical. Regardless of his justifications, the truth was that his actions had a devastating impact. The victims' families were forced to relive the pain of losing their daughters in an unimaginable way. Some refused to believe what had happened, while others demanded justice beyond psychiatric confinement. The Russian judicial system also faced a dilemma. On one hand, doctors insisted that Anatoly was mentally incapable of answering for his crimes. On the other, public outcry demanded that he be treated as a common criminal. The possibility that he could one day be released from the psychiatric clinic left the population uneasy. In 2018, the first attempt to grant him freedom emerged. A group of psychiatrists concluded that Anatoly was no longer dangerous and suggested that he be transferred to home treatment. The idea sparked outrage and was immediately rejected. New evaluation was conducted, and the decision to keep him institutionalized was reaffirmed. Today, Anatoly Moskvin remains in the clinic, now nearing 60 years of age. His future remains uncertain. He could spend the rest of his life confined or eventually be deemed fit for reintegration into society. The mere possibility of his release is enough to unsettle those who still remember the human dolls that once inhabited his home. Anatoly's case was more than just a macabre story. It provoked deep reflections on the boundaries between insanity and crime, on how far mental illness can serve as justification, and on the impact a disturbed mind can have on the lives of so many people. But perhaps the biggest question of all is this: if Anatoly had received psychological help when he was young, could his crimes have been prevented? The case of Anatoly Moskvin is one of the most disturbing in Russia's criminal history. Unlike serial killers or common criminals, he did not kill anyone, but his actions violated something even more profound: the right to eternal rest. The victims' families were never able to find true closure in their grief. Upon discovering that their daughters' bodies had been removed from their graves and turned into grotesque dolls, many were forced to relive their loss in a cruel and unimaginable way. For Russian society, the case raised difficult questions. What should be done with a criminal who did not kill but committed such macabre acts? Was justice served by institutionalizing him, or should he have received a harsher punishment? And if one day he is deemed fit to return to society, can he truly be rehabilitated? While these questions remain unanswered, one thing is certain: Anatoly Moskvin's story served as a warning about how untreated mental disorders can lead to unimaginable consequences. But what do you think about this case? Did Anatoly deserve a harsher punishment, or was psychiatric confinement the right decision? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any more stories like this. Your support helps us continue bringing you amazing content. See you in the next episode.